What is cracking, everybody out there in the internet? And I don't know if you can be off the internet if you're on the internet listening / watching this video right now, but in any case, I am Emmett Watkins Jr., also known as JSpun61, on all places around the internet, and I'm here today to talk to you about something very near and dear to my heart through the Trojan horse of a brand new album that has brought a lot of these topics and thoughts up to the surface once again for the first time in a very long time. Today we're going to be reviewing the album The Rise and Fall of Slaughterhouse by Joell Ortiz and King Crooked, and we will be talking about the music itself for a big chunk of this video, but this is also going to be a video kind of processing a lot of my personal thoughts on Slaughterhouse, because I have a lot of personal thoughts. I don't talk about it too often, but yeah, I'm a big Slaughterhouse fan, and that's going to affect my opinion on this body of work and some of the responses and reactions to this body of work by certain individuals, which we will talk about here. I am not sure what gameplay I have for this one. I'm pretty sure I'm just showing some Horizon Forbidden West gameplay where I'm just fighting some machines in the background without any spoilers or anything. So if you're worried about that, don't be. I'll make sure not to include anything plot critical or plot adjacent even. But in any case, that's the gameplay you're going to be looking at. And yeah, I am just going to talk about this album. I have some notes here. I know these videos tend to be very long, and this video is probably going to be pretty long as well, but I don't want to get too rambly here, so I got some notes on the songs and tracks themselves, but when it comes to like the drama as a whole, that will be a little bit more off the cuff. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it, y'all. Slaughterhouse is a rap group that was comprised of Crooked I at the time, now known as King Crooked, Joell Ortiz, Joe Budden, and Royce da 5'9". And for the longest time, they were not only my favorite rap group of all time, but my favorite music group of all time, and just my favorite rap thing in existence. I love the Slaughterhouse so much. They represent a style of rap that I still very much so cherish to this day. Now, admittedly, it's not a style that I dabble in too much nowadays, as my tastes have not changed but have definitely broadened over the years. Slaughterhouse comes from a subsection of rap that is very aggressive. It's all about its lyrical content. It's all about how clever it can flip a phrase, or how clever one can flip a phrase, and all the punchlines and things associated with stuff like battle rap, if you ever seen some stuff like that. I know the most widespread comparison would be stuff like 8 Mile, and I guess 8 Mile would be a similar comparison, but these spitters are, I don't even want to put them into a box like that. Royce da 5'9" was an artist that I was familiar with through Eminem, because I grew up listening to a lot of Eminem, like a lot of people did. And the Bad Meets Evil album, all that stuff. I was familiar with Royce da 5'9" from there, but Crooked I, Joell Ortiz, and Joe Budden were all completely new to me, with the exception of Joe Budden. Of course, Pump It Up. You couldn't go anywhere in the early 2000s without hearing Pump It Up in some way, shape, or form. So I'm very familiar with that song. But yeah, I learned about all these artists at the exact same time and learned about them as a group, and it was just incredible. It just activated my mind. I'm a big fan of hip hop for the wordsmith theory of it. I love it when people put together clever phrases and put together clever lines. So I absolutely loved everything they did. I was there for their first album, the self-titled album Slaughterhouse. Of course, I was there for Welcome to Our House, which I still have. I don't know if I have the physical copy of the CD anymore. It's somewhere around this room maybe, but I still have my case for it. I have it in my top drawer of my cabinet down here. I still have that physical CD. I have a Slaughterhouse t-shirt. I listened to the mixtapes. I remember the internet at my house used to be so bad. Like the Wi-Fi used to be so bad. I remember when they put out the not House Rules. I believe it was On the House. That mixtape, when that came out, it was a DatPiff exclusive, so you couldn't just pull it off of YouTube quite yet the day it came out. So I was over here on DatPiff trying to download this album, and the Wi-Fi wasn't working, so I switched to the 3G. And because our house is like a little bit away from all the towers, I had to drive deeper into the. It's a small town, but I had to drive deeper into the town just to park in the Kroger parking lot and get just enough Wi-Fi to be able to download this album. That's how much of a Slaughterhouse fan I was. I loved Slaughterhouse so much. I listened to their music all the time, and just to get a more objective measurement of my Slaughterhouse fandom, going to Last FM, which, if you don't know what Last FM is, it's basically a website where it just tracks all the artists that you listen to, all the music that you listen to, for as long as you keep it activated. And I've had it on since 2012, which I think is a year before I graduated high school, and now I am I'm like 27 I believe. 2012 all the way till now. That's a good shit, that's 10 years. God, I feel really old now. But in the last 10 years, if you look at my top artists out of all the things I've played, Slaughterhouse is still number 2 right there in all the things that I've listened to. And they probably weren't number 2 this entire time. For a long time, they were number 1. And then they've gone even as far down to like number 4. But recently I was listening to a little bit of Eminem, so that's number 1 right now. And Kendrick's number 3 still. There was a long time where Kendrick was number 1. Little Brother has been number 1 for a while. Ninth Wonder is right after that. Then Michael Jackson, then Ariana Grande, then Logic. Logic is way too high. I don't like. I like Logic a lot, but it feels kind of wild that Logic is before a Kanye or a Jay-Z or a Dr. Dre or anybody like that. That's a little bit wild, but I did listen to a lot of Logic back in the day, so can't be too ashamed of that. But in any case, I have listened to 4,920 Slaughterhouse songs. Compared to Eminem right above them, which is at 5,445 at the time of me recording this. So that just lets you know, I've listened to a lot of Slaughterhouse songs. And it's crazy that I've listened to that many songs because their output is very minimal. They only put out 2 studio albums. They put out technically 3, but I'm really saying 2 mixtapes. There is a 3rd mixtape, their original kind of introduction to the scene. But a lot of the songs on that first mixtape they put out together are individual tracks from their individual albums, which is fine, but it's really when they get all together that's like the highlight. And yeah, I love it. I love it when they do their thing. And it broke my fucking heart when they all disbanded unofficially. Like they announced Glass House, and I remember there was a big rollout where they put out a brand new single. And it looks like they announced a tour where they were gonna like get together, hit the road again, like the old days. And at that point, the old days were like 3 or 4 years prior. But it looks like Glass House is gonna be their big return. They were gonna have another album. They kept teasing it as an album with a slaughterhouse of producers. They had Just Blaze, they had Arab Music, they had Justice League, and one more person who I'm forgetting. I'm sure someone will remind me in the comments or something, but they had a super group of producers just like they had a super group of rappers, and it was poised to be a very impressive album. But for whatever reason, it never came out. It just slid away, and here we are today with all this dust settling. Crooked and Joel have come back with this album, and before I talk about my response to this album and the responses to this album, let's go ahead and just crack into the album itself, and we'll save all of my specific thoughts for the very, very end. So yeah, let's crack into the track by track breakdown like we normally do on these videos. First things first, let's start with the intro, the birth intro. This is using the same audio clip as clip right before, or I think right after that one track. It's an audio clip from Welcome to Our House. In that album, it sounds like it's Sway. I don't know if it's actually Sway, but it sounds like Sway. But there's a skit called, I think it's the We Did It Slit, or not We Did It Slip, the We Did It skit. It's either on that skit or it's right before, I want to say it's right before Die. Yeah, it's after Park It Sideways and right before Die. That's the clip I'm thinking of. So it's not the We Did It skit. It's right before Die and right after Park It Sideways. And Die is one of my favorite Slaughterhouse songs of all time. I fucking love that song. But yeah, Die is like, or that snippet is basically, I want to say it's the first time they were announced as a group. And it definitely hits that nostalgia for people who were there for that live performance or whatever where they got announced as a group. But for me, it has more direct nostalgia to Welcome to Our House, their debut album on Shady from January 1st of 2012. I was about to say 2022. It's been 10 years, y'all, literally 10 years since they put out another major album. And so yeah, that really cut deep. And then you hear like some, even more talks from how Slaughterhouse came to be, where, when Joe Budden, of course, Slaughterhouse came together based off of a Joe Budden album. All these rappers got on the same song. It was, of course, Joel, Crooked, Royce, all getting on there with Joe Budden and Nino Bless. And once Joe told Royce all the rappers that were going to be on the track, Royce was like, oh, that sounds like a Slaughter. And then here we are, Slaughterhouse. And the name is kind of stuck since then. And you hear that clip there in the intro, and it just makes you really think like, oh man, this was a big deal when this group was announced, and when it seemed like all these fellas were getting together for something big. And from that intro, we go on to the first actual track, which is also the first track that they released for this album, first single, I should say, before it came out, and it's called Vacancy, featuring Black Soul. This song, probably more than any other song on this album, gives the most direct closure to Slaughterhouse. It is just, it's cathartic. Cathartic is the word I was looking for. I didn't write that in my notes because I was trying to think of it the whole time, but now that I'm recording, cathartic is the word that I would use to describe this song. Of course, Joel starts this song by just describing all the time that has passed, like talking about all the things that Joe Budden has gotten up to in the years since. Same thing for Royce, same thing for himself, same things for Crooked, and just saying like how much things have changed and how things have just faded away. And it feels like I've gotten into the release of this album has kind of made me regress into a type of person I don't entirely love. I have been looking into like internet drama and stuff a lot more, and it kind of started reminding me of the whole Drake and Pusha T beef back when that was a big deal. And I remember from Drake's diss track that got completely smushed by Pusha later, but in his Duppy freestyle he talks about how he had a mic that Pusha T signed once, and the signature on that mic had faded over time. This verse from Joel Ortiz kind of reminds me of that faded signature he was referring to there. It's it just has that sense of like, man, so much time has passed and things are no longer like they were. And that first verse really hits home even more when King Crooked comes in and is talking about things have also changed a lot, but like here's why things have failed. And this is very cathartic. Now I will say, I feel like there in a lot of songs on this album, King Crooked out-raps Joel Ortiz on here, whether it's bringing more energy or just bringing more punchlines and bars. I feel like there are several cases in which King Crooked outshines, but at the same time, Joel Ortiz brings a different energy to where I feel like at first glance it's easy to say, all right, King Crooked is washing him, when really it's less that he's washing him and more that he's coming at things with a different angle than Joel Ortiz. Because I think Joel Ortiz has the best verse on Vacancy here because of the sense of storytelling, the picture painting that it has. He's not necessarily trying to impress you with all these crazy flows, but he is very effectively telling the story. And with an album called The Rise and Fall of Slaughterhouse, as a Slaughterhouse fan, that story is going to be even more engaging, if not equally engaging, as the lyrical miracle stuff. So yeah, I really, really love this track, Vacancy. I have a couple notes here I wanted to make sure I commented on. And yeah, it talks a lot about, like, once again, reasons why the group shut down. Joe Budden completely eviscerating Eminem for Revival. Like, I'll tell you right now, people can look back into my YouTube channel. I made videos on Revival back when that album came out, and I also don't think that album was great. But Joe Budden was so over the top in his hate of that album, while being technically either signed or just involved with Shady Records, that just didn't seem like a good idea. And you know, when you think back to Joe Budden's history, I mean, he was on Def Jam Records and had a little bit of a feud with Jay-Z months before Jay-Z became the president of Def Jam. So it's like he often gets himself in these situations. So once Joe Budden talked all that shit on Eminem while Slaughterhouse was still under Shady, that was clearly not the best choice, and he kind of planted the seed for them to get out of that record deal. And even when they did, he still didn't rap, and here we are. And of course, Joe Budden also retired several years ago from rapping, and he'll tease every now and then, oh, I might get in the booth, but like, we're still here. He still hasn't. I'm not even holding out hope for it at this point. But yeah, they talk a little bit about that, and it just really it brings up all these emotions back, because I remember when that happened, I was like, look, we know the album's bad, but as someone involved with Eminem, you don't talk shit that recklessly. Like, it just felt really strange and just frustrating. Like, Joe Budden has a lot of issues, and we will talk about a lot of issues with him as we talk about this album. But yeah, just the song overall just makes you feel really sad, really remorseful. And honestly, when I first watched the video for this on their YouTube channel before this album was even announced, I almost cried. Like, it felt nice to finally get that closure, to finally have them speak on it, and to finally put the nail in the coffin, because I haven't been checking for Slaughterhouse for a long time, just because it's been so quiet on that front. And after a certain while, you stop asking, hey, when's Glass House coming out? Hey, when you guys are making another track? Hey, when y'all getting back in the booth together? You stop asking that question after a while, and I had stopped asking that question internally and externally for so long that getting this jolt of nostalgia here really hit different. So yeah, very impressive. And you know, people are even well, I shouldn't say people. Crooked specifically takes a little bit of responsibility, you know, acknowledging that everyone had their vices in their group back in those days, and Crooked had his own vices. You know, he was deeper into drinking a lot. He drunk a lot back in that time period, and it led him to make, you know, not the most responsible decisions. And he's taken a little bit of responsibility of that and how that could have affected the business side of Slaughterhouse. So it's refreshing to see them not just trying to point blame the entire time, trying to take a little bit of responsibility themselves. So really like that. Vacancy, great track. Definitely a strong starting to the album. After that, we have Ain't Nobody Mad. The beat on this one, it's a little strange. I don't love this beat. I think it is, I mean, Joel Ortiz and Crooked are both really good spitters. I think they can spit on damn near any beat and come off really well. But this one did come off a little just strange, just slightly strange. But overall, I like it. I think Crooked Eye going in the second half of this song really improves the track overall, and just, you know, flow wise, Crooked Eye's flow is impeccable on here. Joel is good on this track. I don't want to say he's weak, but this is one of those instances where it does feel like Crooked Eye is outshining Joel on this album overall in several instances, just like this. But what I like about this song primarily is just the fact that they're really hammering it home that this isn't about beef. This isn't to, you know, shit on Royce. This isn't to shit on Joe. This is just for us, the fans, to give us some type of closure, because we've been sitting here for more than a decade, just hoping, praying that these guys would get back together and give us some type of new music. And it consistently hasn't been happening. And we've had teases here. We've had My Brother's Keeper track from Joel Ortiz a while ago with all the folks on it. We had Microphone Preem off of Prime 1 with all the folks on it. We had a couple singles here and there around the Southpaw movie time period. But ultimately, none of that worked out to result in any full scale album rollout. And they're just talking about their problems with that specifically. They basically, this entire song is just to kind of quench the thoughts and opinions of people who are like, oh man, these dudes, they're not as popular, so now they're bitter, or blah, 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 blah. All the critiques that people could have on this album. Ain't Nobody Mad is their attempt to squash those opinions before they're even said. And I think that's fine, but I do think you walk a weird line when you try to get too meta about things. You kind of walk like the Eminem kamikaze line, where you're talking about the critics for an album, that they haven't heard yet, and you're trying to guess what they think about it. That always can be a little bit problematic, but overall I like the song. I think it's fine. It's definitely like not a filler song, but it doesn't have the highest highs of the entire album, and for that I think it's acceptable. Joel has a really good flow on here, so overall I think the track is good. Then after that we have Backstage. This has such a this whole song sounds like a flashback from the very like slowed down beat. And I won't even say slowed down. It just feels very like this beat sounds like you're looking through a photo book. It just has that like soul food, like just it comes off like a memory. This entire track does. And I like that. I like that a lot. Now one issue I have with this track is a little bit of a concern. There's one line in here where Joel Ortiz says something along the lines of back when y'all were actually here. I still have Genius up. I'm a God, I need to shave my beard because sometimes I'll be talking, or not even my beard, my mustache. Sometimes I'll be talking and I'll just like catch a hair on my tongue and I'm like, oh hell no, I do not want that in my life at all. So yeah, let's see where this line is. Sober. Yeah, right here, Joel Ortiz, who has the first verse in this song, says, before Royce and Crook was sober, man, this shit was ill. We sipped to kill while give groupie bitches the dick and chill. That line kind of threw me off a little bit. And of course, he talks about Joe ain't drink, but he partied on them prescription pills. The one video depicted how he was living for real. And that's a reference to one of their first singles, the one where they were just partying crazy. That line troubles me a little bit because I don't know if this is the case because it seems like they weren't even super duper close to begin with. But that line gives me the vibe of Joel Ortiz being friends with them mainly around their vices. And that concerns me because people know those types of friends that only come around when there's a party, when only comes around to drink, only come around to smoke, only come around to pop something. And that's like their default setting when they're around you. Those aren't always the best friends to have. They're not always the healthiest friends to have. Those are not necessarily the types of friends where, oh man, I'm going through hard times, I need help, or oh man, I'm moving, you mind, you got a truck to help me take this couch over, that type of friendship. It didn't seem like that's the type of friendship they were fostering when I hear a line like that, and it concerns me a little bit. And of course, as we get deeper into the album, they talk about their actual friendships a little bit in a way that makes it seem more like not necessarily that they are toxic friends, but that they aren't the tightest of friends anyway. So I guess that line isn't as, troubling as I might be worried about. But when I think about it, I look back at the Slaughterhouse album, the original self-titled Slaughterhouse album, and there's a skit on there called The Mind of Joe Budden, I believe. And it's basically just a parody, I guess, of it plays a couple seconds of here's Joe Budden's mind just normally. And it's like all this chaotic, all this noise and blah, 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 blah. And then they do a voiceover, here's Joe Budden's mind off of a bunch of Vicodin and this pill and that pill. And it's like just birds chirping in silence. And it's like, that's a little bit troubling. And even, some tracks make small references to like Crooked Eye's drinking habit and, oh, this drunk motherfucker, he's never up, leaving this voicemail and stuff. Like, that's a little bit troubling in hindsight now. At the time when I was like, 16, 17, maybe 18, enjoying these songs for the first time, that was not anything. It didn't raise a red flag for me at the time because it's rap. It's some fucked up shit. This is how these people live. And, I took it for what it was. But yeah, with all this hindsight, it's like, man, that's a little bit concerning. I don't know if I love that bar from Joel Ortiz, but it is what it is there. It seems like they're all better men now. Of course, Royce has been talking about how great it is to be sober now. Joel Ortiz is a family man now. Homeboy's got a child. He's a grandfather at this point because one of his kids got kids now. So like he is a different man at this point. And same thing for Crooked Eye. Crooked Eye is on that like conscious rap shit a lot recently. And he has changed his life, for the better as well. And also speaking of Crook, I love the biblical references in Crook's verse here. Like I love these series of bars right here. Honestly, I think this is the hardest section of bars in the entire song here. Crooked goes, Joseph never treasured my efforts. He couldn't spot a goat like shepherds and leopards, but I'm a king like Nebuchadnezzar. Like, come on, that's great. And then right after that, bag of gold for us. I took the Zion, but the 3-man story didn't fit in the book of Ryan. That's incredible. Of course, Joseph, referring to Joe Button, didn't treasure my efforts. So I thought that was great. Nebuchadnezzar, of course, has a biblical figure. And the fact that he was able to rhyme Nebuchadnezzar in a bar at all is fucking incredible. And then, of course, the Book of Ryan is the name of Royce da 5'9's album from a couple years ago. I thought that was a solid album. I enjoyed it well enough. Great J. Cole feature on that album. And a great... who's the other rapper? I want to say it's Buddy, but it's not Buddy. The guy who did something, can't remember nothing. He signed to Shady. I forget his name. He's from the West Coast. Long story short, great bars there. I love that type of writing from Crooked. After that, we have the 5th track here, Flood Waters by Sly Paper. Man, it looks like fly paper when I see his name written down. This is another one where it's a strange beat, but it's less that it's an actual weird beat to rap on. It's a totally fine beat to rap on. It gives me vibes of like the type of beat that Dr. Dre would make today. And by that, I mean, if you heard his album called Compton that he released alongside the Straight Outta Compton movie, that album had a lot of very cinematic instrumentation. It wasn't the traditional stuff that you expect from, you know, Chronic 2001 or even further back with the original Chronic. This one, it just felt very theatric in a way where I'm not used to Slaughterhouse being on a beat like that. I'm not used to Crooked rapping on a beat like that. I'm not used to Joel rapping on a beat like that. But they do fine enough on it. I feel like the beat is so specific that they have to ride the beat in a very specific way. And I feel like they focus more on riding the beat and matching the tone of the beat than they did about making some really incredible punchlines and making some really incredible lines. And because of that, this track is good, not great to me. I like a lot of the bars that Joel has, a lot of references to, you know, COVID-19, racial injustice, Colin Kaepernick and stuff. And he has a lot of good bars in there, but it's not anything I haven't heard before. It's said well, cause you know, they're on this really unique beat and I like it. But this one feels kind of like it's a low point energy wise, because a lot of songs on here that we'll get to later, this song is going to be way more low key than some of these later tracks. Now, if we look at the bar facts real quick, King Crooked coming in with some really, really fun punchlines here. Gun like a dick sucker in a hearing aid. It's giving death blows. I love that. I know that's probably corny to a lot of people, but I heard that the first time I was like, ooh. So I was like, shit, that's really good. And here's a 2-parter that I liked here. Haters coming at me terribly. I'm gonna get you in the end, Cherokee. Get sought out for the heresy. I'ma rock him like Eric B. So much good shit in there, but mainly it's the 2 ending bars here. I'm gonna get you in the end, Cherokee. Like Cherokee Indians, of course, and then in the end, I'm gonna get you in the end. I thought that was great. That's like the type of bars that just light up my brain when I hear them. And then at the end here, I'm gonna rock him like Eric B. Rakim and Eric B, you know, the rapping duo. That's great. That's great. I'm gonna rock him like he's gonna get rocked. Man, it's great. It's great. I don't want to explain it all because that just ruins the fun of it. But I love bars like that. And this is, you know, bars like this are the reason why I fucked with Slaughterhouse so much. I would listen to their music over and over and over again just because the energetic vibe of their music was always very intoxicating to me. But also, you know, all these lines, all these bars, I don't catch them all on the first go. Like I listen to them years and years and years down the line. And sometimes I'll be catching a bar for the first time that I didn't even comprehend was something clever back in the day. Like one example I'll give just from Royce da 5'9", on Prime, he had one line where he was like, never smile Kawhi Leonard. When I heard that song the first time, I don't know what song it is, but when I heard that bar the first time, I didn't know who Kawhi Leonard was. And then several years later, where he's more and more popular, being tweeted about more and more, being memed more and more, it was inescapable, me knowing who Kawhi Leonard was and his little weird personality and such. And then later on, I heard that song again, and he said, "Never Smile, Kawhi Leonard," and I knew who Kawhi Leonard was. And the fact that he doesn't laugh. So, like, you know, it's that type of thing where I love these bars because it just, there's so many connections here. I go live some life, I come back, and I get a new bar out of it. And that's why I like Slaughterhouse so much, and why I love King Crooked and Joel Ortiz so much. They make good music when it comes to that. And so, yeah, Floodwaters, decent song, some good lines, but not the greatest song on here. And it is a big contrast to the next song on here, which I think is probably the most high energy song on the entire album. Fuck Glass House. This is like the closest thing to a diss track on this album. I think a lot of people were expecting this album to just come at Royce and Joe Budden aggressively, and it doesn't at all. But this is probably the closest thing to that type of energy that people might have expected. It goes hard, but like, once again, there aren't a million bars in here. There are a handful of good bars, but just the energy is just high the entire time. And so, yeah, I like this track a lot. And it really breaks my heart, though, because I wanted Glass House so bad. I was so excited for Glass House. I was out there when they put out the tour. I was looking at that tour list and like trying to figure out, all right, so when do I need to take off work? Because I am not missing this fucking tour. Because at this point, it had been so long for the Slaughterhouse guys getting together. I was like, this might be the last time I'll ever get to see these guys together. And then they canceled the tour like a week or two later. So, yeah, it hurts. It hurts. But yeah, Glass House, yeah, it was their last album, and I've already explained what that album is going to be, but like, man, that would have been so cool if it came out. And they even say it. Cricket says at one point during the song, fuck that album, just leak it through a dummy corp. Someone just put it on the internet. Like, someone just leak it. No one cares anymore. Everyone's thought process on that album has gone away. No one cares. Just leak it. Let the fans have a taste, because we have been hoping for that taste for the longest time. I've listened to snippets that leaked on the internet from long ago of that album. It sounded great. It sounded great. And I know those men are different people than they were back then when they made that album. But like, as fans, we have the context of it. We know if they say anything reckless that they wouldn't say today. That was a different time. And honestly, Slaughterhouse is known for that. Like, that's one thing. I have changed substantially since I started listening to Slaughterhouse as a kid. There are some things that they say in their songs that I cannot back up. There are certain slurs that they say, certain punchlines that work off of some flawed ideology that I don't completely mess with nowadays. But like, at the time, that shit hit. And, you know, I believe that a lot of people will be able to take that stuff in context and understand that these are different men now than they were when they made that album. But someone should leak it anyway. And so, yeah, I think Joel Ortiz and Crooked both kill it on Fuck Glass House. And let's go to the bar facts real quick. I like this one from, let's see, this one. Yeah, this one's from Crooked. Gun in a safe is the pole vault. I get it jumping with the stick. I like that line. It's a lower key line, but you know, pole vault, jumping with the stick, you jump over the thing with a stick. I thought that was pretty clever. I like that a lot. This next one, I actually dropped my mouth. Like my jaw dropped when I heard this the first time. It's ill how you niggas claim to kill, but run your mouth. I still be in the field with the gloves. You in Clubhouse. That fucking fucked me up, because as soon as I heard that, the first thing I thought of was Joe Budden. Because Joe Budden has become that type of person where he's not in the field, he ain't active, he ain't like in the streets or anything. Though I will say, I would believe Joe Budden to be in the streets than a lot of other rappers. But like, he is the type of person to open up IG Live. He will be on the internet, and he will talk his shit on the internet first before any alternative method. So I totally thought of that first. Now, Joe Budden isn't necessarily someone I think of in attachment to Clubhouse specifically, but you know, Clubhouse is definitely the home of a lot of those types of people who will get on the internet and talk a big game. Your DJ Academic types. I think of a DJ Academics type of personality when I think of Clubhouse. DJ Academics, for those of you who don't know, I feel like if you're watching a video like this, you know who DJ Academics is, but he was a host with Joe Budden on Everyday Struggle back in the day, and he was known for being a new voice in rap. He was definitely more of the new school type of generation, where he would justify some of the fuck shit that goes on in hip hop nowadays more than others would. And he just talks really flagrant on his live streams. He's kind of he's a little bit of a little shit. I ain't gonna talk too much shit on him because everyone and their mom has at this point, but he's a little bit of a weasel. Very easy to make fun of, very loud and not the brightest, but you know, I thought of him when I heard that Clubhouse line. So I was like, fuck, that got me. And so shout out Joel Ortiz for that line. And from there, we'll go on to the next track here, Brothers Keeper 2. This track hurt. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Now, this is a sequel to the song Brothers Keeper from Joel Ortiz's House Slippers album from way back in, I want to say like, might have been 2014 or 15. It was a long time ago. But that track had all the members of Slaughterhouse on it. That's before Joe Budden was retired. So Joe Budden was on it, Royce was on it, Crooked was on it, and Joel Ortiz was on it. Not the strongest Slaughterhouse track I've ever heard, but, you know, it was solid. And, you know, at that time point, this was well after Welcome to Our House. So it was like, all right, well, they're still together. They're still doing stuff. We're still getting hints that things are good between them. But quite honestly, the hook was harder for me to listen to than most of the stuff on this song. The hook was just my brother and me, kind of implying that Brothers Keeper no longer applies to Joe and Royce anymore. It's just Crooked and Joel out here, you know, backing each other up. And that hurt because, you know, it seems like they were all so tight all those years ago, and now, you know, things change, people float away, and I understand it, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. So yeah, that was kind of hard to hear. The beat is very hard. I'll say the beat is like super like rough, and it feels like, oh man, they about to go in on this beat, but then they don't go in that much. The energy on this one doesn't match Fuck Glass House. The beat matches Fuck Glass House's beat because they're both really hard, but like the actual lyrical delivery is good, but it just doesn't like go as hard as you might expect from a beat like that. Especially they lead the beat in for a while before you hear a voice, so it's like interesting. Now let's go to the bar facts. This whole segment right here is from Crooked. Towards the back half of the song. They cremated my loyalty. My niggas just burned it. Guess that's a different way to say a nigga should earn it. I like that bar a lot. Like, I don't think they should have like held on the bar as long as they did in the song. Like, they kind of like slow down the track a little bit after he says earned it. But like, come on. I like cremation, earn, like that's clever to me. I think that's clever, and I like that line a lot. I think it would have hit harder if it was something he just said and kept going rather than like pausing the whole thing. But yeah, it was good. Then right after that, shit was different in that East Side shack. My father lied to me when he said that he'd beat right back. That led to my brother Crippen said he'd see right cack. Like, come on now, see right cack. That's great. I think the whole thing, what, you know, replacing the C's and the B's and the Bloods and the Crips and all that stuff, I think that thing is not. It's just like, I know it's something that really happens, but it's just over the top enough to be a little bit silly. And when he puts it into this bar, that just like made me laugh a little bit when I heard that the first time. I was like, oh shit. Like, I get it immediately, but it was like, okay, that's kind of clever, kind of funny, just like amusing. But yeah, Brothers Keepers 2, or Brothers Keeper 2, it's more of a kind of emotional gut punch. The concept of the song hits harder than the actual words of the song, to me personally. But it's still a pretty good song. And from there, we go on to the next track, Almighty. Almighty is honestly just another hard track. This has a beat similar to that of Brothers Keeper. It goes really hard. But there isn't that much stuff about Slaughterhouse in this track. And that's kind of the weird thing about this album overall. This album overall is about half about Slaughterhouse and half of just Crooked and Joel just flexing lyrically. Which is fine, which is totally acceptable. I love them both as musicians, and I think them flexing their lyrical talents is great. but this is the third song in a row where there isn't that much about the actual Slaughterhouse breakup, the actual rise and fall of Slaughterhouse. There isn't that much about it in the last two tracks and this track Almighty. And we're getting to the second half of this album pretty quickly. So it's like, man, this is a lot. So I like the track though. There's one bar facts I want to mention here. Long Beach over bags, niggas got colostomies, striking it up in the gang tag, $1 million property. I love Long Beach over bags, niggas got colostomies. Like colostomy bag, like when you get shot and your fluids are in a different bag or whatever. Like I love that. Like the fact that colostomies was the last line of that bar was great, because I've even heard Crooked I use the word colostomy bag a couple times in bars, but this was a very creative flip on that and trying to do it in a different way. I really, really like that bar. But overall, Almighty, it's a good song sonically. I think it's good. I think they have good energy on it, but like there aren't too many bars that I want to highlight. And at this point, we're just getting a bunch of hard tracks, and this just feels like there was an album that Crooked and Joel put out a couple of years ago. I think either not last year, but the year before maybe, called Hard, just HARD. It was an acronym or something, but it was just called Hard. And a lot of the songs on that album sounded like Almighty, sounded like Brothers Keeper 2, sounded like the one before that. Let me scroll up in my notes here. Fuck Glass House. Actually, Fuck Glass House had a lot of stuff about the Slaughterhouse breakup, so apologies for that point earlier. But yeah, they all sounded like those types of tracks, and so this felt like, all right, y'all are just making more songs like that and continuing this like half group effort there more than addressing the Slaughterhouse stuff, which is fine, which is acceptable, but it's just something I noticed here. So yeah, Almighty is a decent track. After that, we get to Smoke, and Smoke is a song that it grew on me really quickly. I listened to that song the first time, I was like, that's fine. But the more I listen to it, I'm like, man, this is great. It's a lot more chill, but I think the bars are just as hard, if not harder, than Almighty and Brothers Keeper 2. It's just rough. Like the beat is super relaxed, super mellow, but the shit they're talking about is fucking like, ooh, that's some grimy shit. Like it comes off as like a Griselda type of track because the beat is so mellow, but the words they're saying are so like, shit, that's some rough shit. And I gotta give it to Joel Ortiz. He came with the hardest bars on this entire song. And I'm gonna read a couple of them in the bar facts here. Right here he says, too hard for you soft niggas, lacrosse niggas. If I'm running around with the stick, it's the off niggas. Like, yo, that is a dope bar. I don't care what anybody says, that bar is fucking tough. I love that shit. And then later on in his verse he says, rap shit, your wife gotta be bored. She only see them boardwalks on Monopoly boards. Like, come on, man, get the fuck up out of here. That is hard. That is tough. The boardwalk in Monopoly, that's hard. Like, man, that's just like that's why I love Joel Ortiz. Joel Ortiz can like deliver, like he ain't even gotta be lyrical miracle about it. He ain't gotta be double time and shit. He can just say a line and say it with such veracity that just makes it impact hard. And I love that shit. And Joel is doing that over and over again in Smoke, and Crooked is also coming with some bars as well, but in this track specifically I think Joel is just fucking doing it. And then after that we have the track Coastin' featuring Trax Sanders. This one feels personal. This one almost feels diss tracky, but it's less diss tracky and more like here's where the falling out happened. So Joel Ortiz and Joe Budden, they are not friends. They definitely are not friends. And a lot of this track seems to be Joel just talking about how Joe Budden really ain't his homie like that. A lot of what he's talking about is, how Joe Budden seems to be giving engagement just whenever he seems like he's kind of over portraying the friendship between him and Joel. It seems like Joe Budden is just trying to keep the conversation up when it's not really genuine. And Joel Ortiz, because Joel Ortiz just comes off to me as just a real nigga. He's just like a dude. Like he's a normal ass dude. And so when y'all try to get him tied up in all these internet drama and all this stuff and doing all that, he's just not for it. He's just not for it. So he can just tell that Joe is coming off as more artificial in that way and just doesn't fuck with it. Like at the end of his verse where he says, "Why you playing with the fans? Tell the truth, you ain't my man." Like, damn, that's rough. That's like, yo, that's like some breakup music for real, for real. So that shit hit hard when I heard that. And then Crooked comes from a more heartbroken standpoint, it seems, where Joel Ortiz seems like he's just done with the kind of friendship politics. Crooked comes off as being more heartbroken that things ended up the way that they ended up, where he's talking about how he secretly gave Joe Budden some more protection when he was hitting up a strip club in his hood, and it just sounded like, all right, they had each other's backs, and how they were ready to write some diss tracks on Lupe Fiasco because he had some beef with Royce the 5'9" sometime last year, I want to say. It wasn't that long ago. Actually, it might not have been last year. It might have been a little bit further back than that. But yeah, he was talking about how he was ready to, get Royce's back for this whole beef. But then he was like, how is Lupe Fiasco gonna encourage the Slaughterhouse people to make some music for each other, but we can't do that ourselves, where we can't get in the room and make some Slaughterhouse music together? So why is an external force gonna get us to turn into Slaughterhouse? Like, that's some fuckery. So yeah, it's just talking about how Crooked seems more heartbroken that the friendship fell apart. He seems more heartbroken that things didn't go the way they did, where Joel Ortiz seems more fed up with the fact that Joe Budden specifically seems to be trying to make things what they aren't. if you understand what I'm saying there. So this track, once again, not the most barred up thing, but this track gives us even more of a peek into the dynamics, the inner dynamics of Slaughterhouse. And it hurts, but it is what it is. This is where things led, and this is where things lie. Don't love it, but this is where we are. And then after that track, we have Still in My Feelings. This track I have a little bit of beef with. I think the track is good. I think, the beat's pretty hard. I think the bars are pretty good on here. But this is a track from Joel Ortiz Autograph album that came out a couple months earlier. I don't like the fact that we are just getting that same song from that album on this album with a Crooked verse added. That makes this entire project, it gives it a small tinge of cheapness. It makes it feel like, all right, y'all didn't have enough original ideas for original songs or original beats or whatever to put on this album, and y'all needed 3 to 4 more minutes of filler. So y'all said, all right, Joel, you ain't even got to write nothing else. Just give me that song. We'll cut it off here, and then I'm going to add another verse here. Like, that's what it feels like, and I don't like it because it makes this album come off. I don't think that this is the case for the entire album, but Still in My Feelings being a recycle makes this entire album feel cheap in a way that I just do not love. And also, I'll say, just the beat itself feels so much like a Joel Ortiz beat. Like, yes, it is on his album, so it makes sense, but I listened to the album Autograph. There's some beats on that album that feel genuinely innovative and original for Joel Ortiz. He does not rap on some of those beats that he usually raps. There's some variety in the production on that album that I think is really good. And so for them to take the song that is the most traditionally Joel Ortiz song ever, I ain't gonna say ever, but the beat is super traditional Joel. And so hearing him rap again with the same exact bars and everything again on this different album, like I said, it makes it come off as cheap. It makes it come off as low effort, and I don't like it. But I will point out to this one bar. Now, this bar is still on the Autograph version of this song, but I still like the bar. So from Joel Ortiz, he says, and notice I had to strip lock big rocks in my socks, all tied up in zip locks. Fifth Glock on my hip had him dancing before TikTok. Like, I love that. Like, of course, Joel Ortiz is an old man at this point. No disrespect, but, he's an older gentleman when we talk about rappers. So him referencing TikTok and stuff is like, all right, that's a pretty nice bar. I like that he's, using shit from today in correct ways. So good stuff on there. Then the second last track on the album, Look Mama. I like this track a lot. I like the beat. The beat is like some Rugrat shit, like straight up. It has like a nostalgic whimsy that I really, really like. And it's also not the type of beat I expect from Crooked or Joel. I think they both are, going a little bit out of their comfort zone and rapping on a beat like this, but I think it fits for the vibe where this is their Mama I Made It song. This is their Dear Mama, that classic Tupac song. And it definitely fits the vibe here. And it's a bittersweet vibe because they're talking about literally in the chorus, they're like, you'll see my face in lights. I'm on the marquee. You'll see my name and like all this massive fame. But in reality, the biggest fame that either of these two men have had are with Slaughterhouse. So it's kind of heartbreaking to think that they're saying, Mama, I made it. But it's not that they're failures after Slaughterhouse. Like, let's keep that real. The fact that they are making a living off of hip hop at all is remarkable. They've made it as far as I'm concerned. But like, it's a little bit ironic that the fame that they rap about in this song isn't quite as strong since Slaughterhouse kind of, went the way of the nothing. So that kind of hurt. Now, I will say for this track and the next track, Genius didn't have lyrics for it, and I wasn't able to find lyrics for either of these tracks. So when I get to bar facts, they might not be one for one what they said, but I really do love this series of bars from Crooked here in the bar facts here. He says, fly in that island somewhere, arriving low key with my Hawaiian Sophie. Dude, when I heard that the first time, I almost screamed. Like, I was listening to this album. I listened to it on the way to work and at work. So by the time I got to this track, I was already working. And I almost shouted in the middle of the store. I was like, yo! Like, cause like, y'all know I love Loki. I think that's one of the best Marvel projects they've ever put out. The Loki TV show specifically. And bro, when he said that, I was like, that's fucking great. I was like, Crooked Eye watches Loki. That's awesome. So yeah, it's great. The whole Loki and Sophie thing. I thought that was such a great relationship anyway. And so it's just really, really good. So yeah, that was a really good bar. And then two more from Joel. Of course, Joel bringing it with the bars as well. In the past, I talked about your drug habit and shit. I told that story enough, but now I'm happy to spit about other stuff that his mother did. Because Joel, they're talking about their mom and how the good times that he had with his mother and stuff. But I remember so many Joel Ortiz songs about his mother being addicted to drugs. And it's so nice for him to acknowledge that he talked about that a lot, to the point where maybe he feels guilty about it now and would like to talk about the happy moments that he had with his mom as well. I think that's really great because, right after that bar, he talks about, the Thanksgiving dinners were great and how his friends would always get a bite to eat as well. And how sometimes his mom would take him to the store and let him buy what he wanted, and, the good memories. So it's nice to hear him acknowledge that the bad stuff happened, but say, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about all the good. I really like that. And then one last bar from him. This is for the single mom who did it when my dad was lacking. Funny, he disappeared, but you did the magic. I think that's pretty clever. It's a layup of a bar, but I think it's really cute, and it kind of adds to the vibe of this track being more reminiscent, being more playful, the whimsy of this beat kind of leading to those cornier bars kind of fitting a little bit better. So I really, really like that. And then we have the last track of the album, which is called Sorry. And this one hurt. Like, this is another time where I almost cried when I first listened to this, but I was at work, so I was like, don't cry, you're at work, people are gonna ask questions. First off, I love this beat. It seems like some type of soul sample from like an 80s R&B, maybe early 90s R&B type track. Like some Bobby Brown shit. Like honestly, like some New Edition. It comes off as that, and I always love soul beats, or less soul beats, but I love beats from the 90s, and I really have a big nostalgic spot in my heart for R&B songs or just R&B beats that people rap over. Like, I think it's Total featuring Biggie, where it's like, can't you see what you did to me? Or I forget how it goes, but Biggie and Total, I love that song. I forget what it's called. I think it's Can't You See, or someone's watching it. I don't know what it's called, but I like that song, and I like a lot of songs like that. So this kind of gives me that vibe. Then the other thing about this song, this feels like the final nail in the coffin. This feels like, for real, if you didn't think we were serious with this whole album, this song is gonna really hammer home. hey, sorry, but Slaughterhouse is done. Like, it's over. And we apologize to all the people who believed in us, all the people who helped us with our tours, all the people who helped us with producing, all the people who worked on Glasshouse and then didn't get paid because the album never came out. And that's the thing that really broke my heart near the end there, where Cricket's talking about, you know, he's listing the folks that were in their corner when it came to Glasshouse. You know, Q-Tip from A Tribe Called Quest was fucking with Glasshouse. Like, I don't know if he had a feature or what, but like when he said Q-Tip's name, my knees got weak. I was like, bro, we could have had an amazing album. And the fact that they were talking about how Just Blaze was still mixing it when they were trying to save face that the album was no longer happening, that just got me so much as well, because I remember hearing that. I remember seeing the interviews or the articles or whatever where one of the members would say, oh yeah, Just Blaze still working on it, or one of the producers still working on it, knowing damn well that they still had bars to record and that shit was just in limbo. So yeah, that it hurt, man. Sorry, just really, it bums me out because Slaughterhouse is dead, like for real, and it's over, and it's possibly never coming back, and it hurts, but this is the path that was chosen, and it is the path we all live on now. And so now we get to the end of the album, and my personal thoughts on this album, on the conversation around it. Now, I've been looking at Joe Budden, and I've been looking at Royce da 5'9", and it seems like it was already discussed. Crooked said this straight up. Crooked and Joel did not tell Joe Budden and Royce da 5'9" that they were planning on putting out this album. Now, they put the final deal for Slaughterhouse, as mentioned a little bit in this album, the final deal that Crooked tried to take to everybody, that discussion was had in September of last year. So like early fall of last year, Crooked was like, all right, I got a 7-figure deal here. Slaughterhouse, we got publishing on this. One album, we can do this. Joel was good with it. Royce said, I'm good with it, but I'm not doing a 3-man group, so we got to hit up Joe. And then Joe's been retired for several years at this point. So already the expectation is no, it's not going to happen. But Royce calls Joe and it's like, yo, Joe, we got this deal. And Joe's like, I don't like the deal. And so Royce is like, all right, well, you got this many hours to call him, so go ahead and call him. And then Crooked even tweeted about it and said, hey, y'all, call me. I might have a deal. And then everybody on Twitter was buzzing about it. I remember because I was there. And, you know, we get to all this time after and nothing really came of it. Because Joe Budden didn't pick up the phone to call Crooked. And everybody else seemed okay with it. Everyone else spoke with Crooked. Joe Budden was the only one who did not speak to Crooked. And now we're here. And all the fuckery from Joe Budden. Now, first, before I even get to Joe Budden, because Joe Budden is the one I have a lot to say about, Royce da 5'9", I feel slightly more sympathetic to, even though he is, you know, also one of the people who led to the demise of Slaughterhouse. But let's keep it real. Like, Royce da 5'9", I feel like he legitimately cared about the group Slaughterhouse. I feel like he legitimately not necessarily had ideas for what to do, but the idea of spitting with these lyricists excited him. It seems like he legitimately was heartbroken that the rest of the group just kind of fell apart without him thinking about it. I think he thought, okay, I'm doing this stuff. I'm getting my Grammy. I'm getting these features. I'm doing all these mega moves, and he's getting his flowers. Like, respect to him, man. I'm not going to say The Allegory is the greatest album I've ever heard or anything, but he's making good music. I like a lot of his music. I like a lot of his collaborations. He's doing good work. And I figured I'm thinking that he thought Slaughterhouse was something so permanent, something so unbreakable that he didn't need to do any maintenance on it. I think he thought, all right, I can have Slaughterhouse on the back burner as long as possible, and it will stay there for me forever, and I can go do all my other desires, all my other projects and stuff, and I can still come back to Slaughterhouse, and we can still make that happen whenever the cards fall in the right way. I think the thing he forgot to realize is that for Joel and for Crooked, Slaughterhouse wasn't just something to have in the background forever. this was a part of their discography. Like, a lot of people know Crooked and know Joel only through Slaughterhouse. And the fact that they hadn't done anything else with Slaughterhouse in all this time makes it seem like, yo, we're trying to eat a little bit. And like I said, they're still both doing very well. Joel Ortiz has put out so many albums in all these years, and Crooked has put out a lot of projects too. Like, Crooked was doing hip hop weeklies again like 2 years ago. So like, they've both put out a lot of work, and a lot of good work too. But like, Slaughterhouse was so much more important. I feel like Crooked and Joel saw Slaughterhouse as a much more important entity when it was in action, where Royce didn't feel like it was anything important to him in action. It feels like for Royce, he could just come back to it whenever because everything else was going great. Where for Joe and Crooked, it was like, yo, we want to get back to this because this was some of our favorite things to do. Well, Royce, he's already being recognized for doing shit on his own, so he has no incentive to get back on it. So I don't think Royce is necessarily a piece of shit because he helped Slaughterhouse break away and stuff. He had other stuff to focus on, and I understand that. And to be honest with you, Joe Budden also had other stuff to focus on. You know, he's blowing up the podcast. The podcast network as well was blowing up. He had a lot of things in the oven. He had a lot of buns in the oven. No, he had a lot of things going on at once is what I'm trying to say. But my beef with Joe Budden, especially because when all this controversy happened with the Slaughterhouse album, I went back because I have not checked for Joe Budden since Complex. Since he had his show Everyday Struggle, after that show got canceled and he left and all that stuff, I stopped checking for Joe Budden. I knew he had the podcast. I did not care about the podcast. I was not going to listen to him because he already seemed like he was on some bullshit after his Everyday Struggle rants. Like, after he almost got into a fight with Amigos, I'm like, this guy's wildin'. After he said all that shit about Eminem, and yes, I am an Eminem fan. That is true. But when he said all that stuff about Eminem, I'm like, this is just overboard. And it didn't even stop at the album. Like, I think he said something along the lines of, I've been better than Eminem for the last decade. And it's like, bro, how many albums have you put out in the last decade? And that's true because Eminem also took a long hiatus before Revival, but like, come on. It just felt like he was going too far. And it seems like he was on a bunch of fuckery that I just wasn't willing to be, to follow him with. And that fuckery continued on through his podcast, and I heard through the grapevine. I didn't see firsthand because I wasn't there, wasn't listening to the show. But when the Joe Budden podcast fell apart, when Rory and Mal separated, I saw all that shit happen from a distance, and with all this controversy today now with the Slaughterhouse album, I went back to go look at that stuff a little bit deeper, and man, what the fuck, man? I can't believe Joe Budden has just always been messy, and I've been looking into Joe Budden deeper and deeper, just relating to the stuff, just so I can be, educated. Once I made this video, he self-sabotages so much throughout his life. The Love and Hip Hop stuff, the stuff with Tahiri trying to get married with her, and then she says no because you're a piece of shit. And you should have known that because you're a piece of shit. And then, God, this is getting personal. But of course, the stuff with Def Jam where you're gonna antagonize Jay-Z, the biggest person on the label, then he owns the label later, and you get fucked over. Like, you didn't see that coming, my boy. And then you're gonna pick a fight with Drake when you're a way smaller artist, and you know that you influenced Drake, and you're gonna pick a fight, and then you can't even make it into the upper echelon of hip hop as much as you want because you're picking fights with the biggest artists in the world and making feuds with the biggest artists in the world. And then even with this podcast, you're talking to, I'm not the biggest Charlemagne the God fan, but you make enemies with Charlemagne, you make enemies with all these people at Hot 97. It's just not a good look. Or not. Maybe it's not Hot 97. Maybe it's Rosenberg. I forget exactly. But you make all these enemies, and you think you can still come out on top. It's just so much hubris in this man's head. So much ego to this man's head. And that ego is what led Slaughterhouse to die, because when he talked all that shit on Shady, that kind of killed all the talks of Shady keeping Slaughterhouse afloat. So Joe Budden was like, why don't we just go independent and make it happen? They do all the work to make it independent, and then Joe Budden's like, oh, I'm still not rapping, I'm still not retired. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then you want to talk about contracts, like they made a contract for Shady. Joe Budden, of course, did Spotify contract, all these contracts. Joe Budden has been proven to not give a fuck about any contract. He doesn't give a fuck about any type of binding that's going to make him do something he doesn't want to do. And so like that clip came out a couple days ago as of me recording this, where Crooked Eye put out the little audio snippet of a conversation he had with Crooked, or a conversation that Joe Budden had with Crooked, where he's like, what's your problem with Shady? And Joe's like, everything. And then Crooked's like, well, what contractually did they do that they weren't supposed to, or vice versa? Like, what didn't they do that they were supposed to? What contractually? And then Joe Budden was like, what you mean contractually? I don't give a fuck about a contract. And then Crooked was like, but we put our name. You got to care about a contract. We put our name on a contract. And then Joe's like, well, that's where I'm different. I don't give a fuck about a contract. I break contracts all the time. And right there, when I heard that, I was like, there's no hope for this man. There's no hope for this man. I don't know why I ever hoped that Slaughterhouse would get back together if this is one of the pillars that had to come back. Like, they were kind of doomed from the start. And Crooked was even telling me there was an old song on Eminem's, what's the name of that album? The song was called Session 1, and it was on Recovery. And it was a bonus track. And on that song, they had all the Slaughterhouse except for Joe Budden. And he explained why that was, because Joe Budden was still under contract with a different record label. And Joe Budden was like, oh, I didn't sign that contract. They faked my signature. So they got all the lawyers got together, they took it to court, all that stuff. And then eventually they came to the conclusion, yo, Joe, you actually did sign this contract. This is your signature. And then after they came to that conclusion, then they could go forward and figure out how to move Slaughterhouse forward. But that kept shit in lock for months. And so that pushed things back so far. And so you got to question, this thing was kind of doomed from the start. Like, Slaughterhouse started when they all got on a Joe Budden song. So from the beginning, Joe Budden was going to be a part of this, no matter how you cut it. But it seems like because of that, Slaughterhouse was never going to go as far as people would have hoped. This was never going to be a Wu-Tang. This was never going to be, even a Black Hippie. Black Hippie's different because they never put together an album or anything. Black Hippie being the group comprised of Schoolboy Q, Kendrick Lamar, J-Rock, and Ab-Soul. They would just get on tracks a couple times, but each of those artists are very, very successful in their own respects. So, I can't talk too much shit on them, but this was never going to be a big deal, a long-term thing in the way that us fans wanted it to be. And I guess getting that confirmation now, it hurts a little bit, but it's all for the better. I hope now all of us Slaughterhouse fans that have prayed and hoped and dreamed that something would be happening one day, now we can go forward. Now we can fully enjoy the artists of the group that we do still like. I'm still not the happiest with Royce, because Royce is sided with Joe Budden in this whole fiasco. And I don't think that's wise, because Royce is a smart guy. Royce knows what's going on. But I think Royce is I think his offense at this happening, because I think he truly cared about the Slaughterhouse brand and the Slaughterhouse idea and concept to the point where he wanted to do stuff with it in the future, but just wasn't ready yet, where Joe was never going to do anything with it. And I don't think you want to side with Joe Budden, because I think diametrically y'all are more opposed than y'all have in common. And so Royce, I'm a little bit disappointed with, because he's on the Joe Budden podcast talking about this stuff. And they also seem like they're a little bit disappointed with the album, because it seems like they were ready for some diss track shit. They were ready to have some fire thrown at them. And then when it turns out that the album is exactly as promised, closure for fans only and not diss tracks towards any specific person, seems like they're both disappointed that it wasn't so aggressive. And it just makes me a little upset about it. It just makes me wish that Royce would just accept that, hey, Slaughterhouse is dead because of inaction. And I understand you wanted something to happen, but you didn't want to make it happen. You said Joe has to be a part of it, and everyone else knew that Joe wasn't going to do anything with it. So here we are, and yeah, it's not my favorite thing, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's everything I have to say about the rise and fall of Slaughterhouse. Overall, I think the album is good. I think the album is solid. I think it's I think for everyone else, I think for a normal average listener who has no affinity for Slaughterhouse ever, I think this is a solid 7 out of 10 album. But for me, as someone who needed that closure, as someone who wanted that closure, it's a good 8 out of 10 for me. It's still not incredible, and the closure for Slaughterhouse is sprinkled throughout the album rather than completely being about that topic. But I think it is still a good album. I think it is, I don't know how much I'll be listening to it over the years, but every now and then I will come back to it for some of the feels and for some of the bars. But yeah, I think the album is solid, but overall, this hour-long video is kind of my eulogy for Slaughterhouse. I'm going to miss him, man. Now, Slaughterhouse came to me in a very specific time in my life. 2013 is kind of when I stopped listening to Slaughterhouse that aggressively, because that was the year I was introduced to Kendrick Lamar. Someone put me on to Kendrick a couple months after Good Kid, Mad City came out. And for people who know me, I am one of the biggest Kendrick Lamar fans in the world. I love Kendrick so much. So that was the beginning of a new era for me. And, a broadening of my taste in hip hop, because it was until then, it was until Kendrick where hip hop was just clever bars and punchlines and nothing else. And then Kendrick said, "Oh, it can be more." And I believed it. And now here I am. So yeah, I absolutely love Slaughterhouse, but Slaughterhouse is just one faction of rap. And we even have good groups nowadays. Like, I talk about Griselda a lot. I love Griselda. And not only do I love Griselda, I love each of those artists individually. I think Westside Gunn is great. I think Conway the Machine is great. I think Benny the Butcher is great. So people are going to be carrying that torch when it comes to really hard, barred up lyricists with some really good, grimy beats. I love that tradition is continuing. It's just not going to continue in the way that I might have wanted when first listening to Slaughterhouse way back in the day. And still, no one can take those Slaughterhouse classics away from me. I still have all those mixtapes saved in my YouTube music uploads, because they'll let you upload custom music, unlike Spotify. I still have those mixtapes. I still have those albums. I still have all those songs. Shit, YouTube music is what I use. I still have all those freestyles that I go back to every now and then. It's all still good. It's all still good music. Some of it might not as aged as well as other things, but I love it. I love it, and it's always going to be a part of me. And unfortunately, not all parts of me can be fed forever and ever and ever. And so this is the end of that. So yeah, that's all I got here. I'm a little bit sad about this whole state of affairs, because it got me into this whole mood of like, because I said it on Twitter at some point, this is the most I've cared about internet drama since Drake and Pusha T's beef. Like, I was invested in all this shit. I was looking at Instagram lives for the first time. I was like looking at all interviews and shit. Like, it's crazy. But I had to lay it to rest, and now that I know everything, I can now lay it to rest. After an hour and 11 minutes, I can finally lay this down to rest. So that's been it for me, y'all. Thank y'all for listening / thank y'all for watching this video on my YouTube channel. If you want to see some more stuff from me, if you want to, get more hip hop content from me, I did write a review for Kanye West Donda. Donda 1 from last year. Donda 2 I have not listened to, because it just sounds like it's not finished, and therefore I should not listen to it. But Donda 1 I wrote a review for on VGU.tv. You can see that in the description below. And then if you want to just hear me talk about video games a lot, I do have a podcast over at VGU.tv as well, and I'll link you to the latest episode of that, which is going to be in the description. And yeah, I'll come back on here when I have another thing to talk about that I don't think is going to be popular enough to get clicks on VGU.tv. We'll figure it out. I like making YouTube videos, but I have so many things I do nowadays where YouTube isn't always the first thing. But I'll come back when I have something else to talk about. Maybe I'll review another movie or something. I don't know. I did just see The Batman, but that was a while ago. So in any case, thank y'all for watching. Thank y'all for listening. This has been Emmett Watkins Jr., also known as DJ Spun 621 on all places on the internet. And as I always say, keep it real, keep it trill. Peace out, y'all.
Move on. And all that shit in the past about me being